I want you to picture a highly secretive industrial plant. This is right in the British Midlands.
Right.
And before you even walk inside this place, you can literally feel the vibration through the pavement under your feet.
Oh, yeah.
There's this constant, just deafening roar of grinding machinery, and it kind of bleeds right through the concrete walls. And inside, the air is just thick with paper dust.
Yeah, you can practically taste it, I'm sure.
Exactly. And you've got these workers in high-vis jackets, and they're standing over these massive, just shuddering conveyor belts. But they aren't assembling anything at all.
No, quite the opposite, actually.
Right. They are feeding pristine, brand new hardcover copies of Jeffrey Archer and David Baldacci novels directly into a giant industrial shredder.
It's wild.
It is, and the books are just violently chewed up by these steel blades, and then it rains down into these massive vats as like paper confetti, and the workers stationed there, they don't care about the plot lines, you know.
I aren't reading the dust jackets.
Exactly. They aren't looking at character arcs. They only care about paper grade. And the reality of this place is, well, it's harsh and honestly, a little dangerous.
Very dangerous, yeah.
I mean, the foreman walking the floor is literally missing a thumb.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, snapped off by this massive 650-kilo baller machine a few years back. There's even a whispered, deeply grim story among the crew about another worker at a different plant down south who, accidentally tumbled into the baller along with all the shredded paper.
Which is just a horrific way to go, meeting a grisly rectangular end.
Yeah.
But it is, I mean, it's a striking, almost dystopian scene, right?
Yeah.
The sheer mechanical indifference to something that we normally treat with such intense reverence.
Yeah.
And that secrecy you mentioned, the managers at this facility purposefully keep the outside of the building looking kind of unkempt and abandoned.
They're hiding it.
Exactly, just to deter visitors. They only granted access to the author of our source material after, like, a year of intense negotiation. And even then, it was under the strict condition of total anonymity.
Right. Well, welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring this really fascinating, slightly unsettling collection of essays today titled Book Destruction from the Medieval to the Contemporary.
A great read.
It really is. And our mission for you today is to basically unpack this profound, deeply paradoxical relationship that we humans have with the destruction of books.
Because it is a paradox, for sure.
Definitely. We want to understand why the sight of a burning page terrifies us, but also why destroying books is simultaneously just like an everyday industrial necessity, and what the hidden, really granular details of history's most infamous book burnings tell us about prejudice and survival.
And a member works, yeah. The discomfort that those recycling plant managers feel about their own operation is honestly a perfect starting point for all this.
Yeah, okay, let's unpack this. Why are they so uneasy?
Well, the publishing industry absolutely relies on these facilities, right?
Right.
If surplus stock just floods the market, book prices collapse.
Makes sense.
So publishers actually demand a literal certificate of destruction for unsold books.
Yeah.
But even on a purely corporate, business level, there is this palpable, unspoken unease about the whole process.
So if it's just a business transaction, why hide the building? Why all the secrecy?
Because that unease stems from a very deep paradox in how we interact with books as objects. I mean, on a purely physical, chemical level, books are just ephemeral matter.
Right, they're just stuff.
Yeah, they're paper, ink, cardboard, a little bit of glue. In that recycling plant, there's a strict clinical caste system of matter. You have white letter grade, multi-grade cardboard, all the way down to what they literally call wet strength tissue.
Wet strength tissue.
Yeah, so the scraps of a best-selling thriller could literally be pulped and recycled into, I don't know, a lottery ticket or a roll of toilet paper tomorrow.
But culturally, we don't treat them like cardboard or tissue at all. We treat them like totems. I mean, you walk into a library or a bookstore and you handle a book reverentially. You don't throw it in the trash when you're done reading it. You put it on a shelf.
Right, you display it.
So when we see a book being aggressively destroyed, it feels like an attack on something much larger than just, bound paper.
Because it is viewed as an attack on the ideas and the people that those books represent.
Right.
The destruction of texts is always emotionally and politically charged.
Yep.
I mean, consider the really famous 1644 quote from the poet John Milton.
Oh, yeah, I know this one.
Yeah, he said, "As good almost kill a man as kill a good book." He was arguing there that destroying a good book essentially kills reason itself. It just snuffs out the human intellect.
Which is a powerful quote.
It is. And we see that emotional charge in modern flashpoints all the time, which the text covers quite objectively,
Right.
like the global riots over Terry Jones burning the Quran, for example,
Right.
or the street protests over Salman Rushdie's The Satanic Verses,
Mm.
or even, the massive press backlash against a women's refuge in the UK that burned copies of 50 Shades of Grey.
Right. Regardless of anyone's personal stance on the content of those specific books, the text shows that the reaction to their destruction is universally explosive.
Exactly. People get furious.
But I want to push back on Milton's quote for just a second.
Okay, go for it.
Is burning a stack of paper really equal to human violence?
Yeah.
I mean, think about it in a modern context.
Sure.
If I have a plastic USB drive, right, and it's loaded with, say, 1,000 classic ebooks, and I put it on the sidewalk and I just crush it with a hammer in front of you.
I mean, I think you were acting pretty weird.
Right. You'd think I'm acting bizarrely, but you aren't going to cry.
No.
You certainly aren't going to call it a crime against humanity, so why does a burning physical book immediately trigger this profound sense of atrocity for us?
That's a great question. And to understand that visceral reaction, we have to look at how history has conditioned us. Milton was speaking metaphorically, right? Right. But the 20th century basically made that metaphor literal, specifically 1930s Germany.
Ah, right. The Nazi book burnings.
Exactly. There's a 19th century German poet, Heinrich Heine, who famously wrote, "Where they burn books, they will ultimately burn people."
Wow.
Yeah. And today, that quote is actually enshrined in bronze at the site of the Berlin book burnings. It's basically become the universal lens through which we view book destruction now.
So the burning of paper isn't just censorship anymore.
No, it's seen as this inevitable, terrifying prelude to the destruction of actual human beings.
And book burning has kind of become the ultimate pop culture shorthand for totalitarian evil.
Definitely.
But here's where it gets really interesting. If you look closely at the actual historical events of 1933, the story is far more complex than just a generic narrative of fascism versus literature.
Oh, absolutely. The bonfires didn't begin with, generic political theory or classic novels.
Right. And we need to zoom in on this specific moment, May 6, 1933. The very first target of the Nazi book burnings wasn't a political publisher. It was the Institute of Sexual Sciences in Berlin.
Founded by Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld.
Yes. Who was just a monumental historical figure.
He really was.
I mean, he was a Jewish physician, a gay rights campaigner, and he actually coined the term transvestism way back in 1910.
Decades before the modern LGBTQ movement.
Exactly. He dedicated his life to fighting against paragraph 175, which was the German law that criminalized male homosexuality at the time.
Right, and within Berlin's thriving queer subculture in the 1920s, Hirschfeld was this beloved, fiercely protective figure.
And the institute he opened, it was so much more than just a laboratory or a library. When you read about it in the source text, it sounds like an absolute sanctuary.
A haven, yeah.
They offered sex and marriage counseling, they ran sexual health clinics, they even pioneered some of the earliest gender-affirming surgeries.
But it was also a lived-in space, right?
Yeah. Hirschfeld lived there. And the institute actually provided housing and refuge for trans and gay individuals who had been rejected by society and just had nowhere else to go.
It was this massive community hub, and importantly, it was an unparalleled archive.
Right.
People from all over Berlin's sexual subcultures would come to the Institute, have their portraits taken, and these images were preserved right alongside medical and anthropological research.
So it was a physical space that documented and affirmed their existence.
Exactly, which explained exactly why it was targeted first.
Yeah, and standard historical overviews often gloss right over this detail.
They do.
They categorize the raid simply as an attack on, like, Jewish intellectualism or just general censorship against un-German ideas.
But the source text proves this was fundamentally driven by homophobia.
Exactly. It wasn't a side effect. It was the core motivation.
The Nazi regime was completely obsessed with enforcing a really rigid conservative so-called Aryan binary of gender and sexuality. So the very existence of the Institute and all the empirical data it held that proved the natural diversity of human sexuality, there was a direct threat to their worldview.
And to truly grasp the level of homophobic panic driving the Nazis during this raid, you have to look at the physical materiality of the event.
What do you mean?
It's not just about what they destroyed, but how they handled the materials.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
The photograph.
Yes. Talk about the photograph.
So there is this highly revealing photograph taken during the raid It's carefully staged, really well lit, showing a Nazi student and an SA man standing triumphantly on this massive pile of books inside the Institute.
And they look like they're intently studying the materials, right?
They do, but they aren't holding medical journals or complex psychiatric texts. They've specifically positioned photographs of topless women at the very front of the pile and in their own hands.
So they deliberately staged the optics of their own raid.
They had to.
Uh-huh.
The regime's homophobic anxiety was so intense that they actually needed to heterosexualize their interaction with the archive for the cameras.
Oh.
Yeah, they were terrified of the visual contagion of their own men being photographed, touching, holding, or studying homosexual content.
So the propaganda needed to establish this distance between the masculine ideal they were trying to project and the homosexual materials they were there to destroy.
Exactly, proving that homophobia was absolutely central to the event.
Which honestly makes it incredibly ironic that their own logistical laziness allowed the most sensitive documents to survive.
Right, the questionnaires.
Yeah. During a raid designed to enact absolute destruction, over 10,000 highly sensitive medical questionnaires detailing non-normative sexualities somehow made it out intact. How did the Nazis possibly miss them?
Well, some post-war commentators theorized it was this grand conspiracy that the Gestapo deliberately saved these questionnaires to use as blackmail or, to hunt people down years later.
But that wasn't it, right?
No, eyewitness accounts point to a much more mundane reality: physical logistics.
It's amazing how history hinges on logistics.
Truly. These questionnaires were essentially massive stacks of loose paper. A single patient file could contain up to 336 pages of dense handwriting.
Jeez.
Now imagine 10,000 of those files. They were incredibly heavy, completely unbundled, and wildly awkward to carry out to the waiting trucks.
Right, and these SA men were mostly looking for quick, dramatic victories for the cameras.
Exactly. So when they questioned what these unwieldy stacks were, they were just told they were merely medical histories.
So because they were loose paper rather than, bound, impressive-looking books with gold lettering on the spine, the looters decided they just weren't worth the heavy lifting.
Basically.
The physical form of the text, the simple awkwardness of loose paper, actually saved a massive chunk of queer history from the fire.
It did.
But as fascinating as that is, the survival story that really stands out for me involves the bronze bust of Magnus Hirschfeld himself.
Oh, yes. The Nazis found this heavy bronze sculpture of Hirschfeld's head at the Institute. And the way they handled it completely mirrors that intense anxiety we saw in the staged photograph.
Right, because they didn't just, carry it out under an arm.
No.
They hoisted it up onto a tall stake and paraded it through the streets. It really reminds me of, a medieval talisman that enemy soldiers believe is cursed.
That's a great comparison.
They wanted the symbolic victory of displaying his head, but they were so profoundly homophobic they were terrified of the homosexual touch. They literally wouldn't hold the bronze in their bare hands.
And what's fascinating here is how simple chemistry ended up defying totalitarianism.
Right.
So they carried it on that stake all the way to the Opernplatz, the site of the infamous bonfire. And they threw the bronze bust directly onto the burning pyre of books, fully expecting it to just melt down into a puddle of slag, erasing Hirschfeld completely.
But anyone who remembers their high school chemistry knows there's a serious problem with that pyre.
A very big problem.
Because paper burns at a temperature of around 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit.
Right.
But bronze, which is an alloy of copper and tin, requires a temperature of between 1,900 and 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit to actually melt.
So it was scientifically impossible for a bonfire made of books to destroy that bust. The fire simply wasn't hot enough.
That is incredible.
And so the bust survived the flames. It was actually pulled from the ashes the next day by a local street cleaner.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he quietly took it home and kept it hidden until the end of the war. Today, you can actually go see it sitting in a museum in Berlin.
It serves as such a powerful, tangible metaphor. The physical embodiment of Hirschfeld's legacy was literally too resilient to be melted down by their hatred.
It's an incredible story of material endurance.
It really is. So the physical objects survived because of chemistry and logistics, but the narrative of what those objects meant was drastically warped in the years that followed, right?
Very drastically. We have to look at the aftermath here, what historians call rewriting the ashes.
Okay.
Let's return to those 10,000 surviving medical questionnaires.
Right, the loose paper.
Yeah. After World War II, you would naturally assume these documents would be celebrated as this miraculously surviving record of a persecuted community.
You would hope so.
But instead, they were weaponized in a completely bizarre and cruel way.
I couldn't believe this part of the source text. The discursive sleight of hand here is just hard to wrap your head around.
It really is.
You had critics and prominent commentators in the post-war era, like the philosopher Theodore Adorno and American writers Ernst and Loth, and they took Hirschfeld's own statistical data from those salvaged questionnaires and twisted it against him.
Exactly. They used the data to insinuate that Nazism was actually driven by the homosexuality of its own leaders.
Which is just wild.
They looked at figures like Ernst Röhm, who was the head of the SA. He was gay and was later assassinated by Hitler in the Night of the Long Knives. And they basically extrapolated that the entire fascist machinery was a product of repressed homosexuality.
So they effectively used Hirschfeld's life's work to suggest that totalitarianism and homosexuality somehow belong together.
Right.
It's the ultimate victim blaming. They linked the marginalized sexologist with the very perpetrators who burned his institute to the ground.
It is a profound historical betrayal. I mean, the texts survived the Nazis, only to be twisted by post-war commentators. And this kind of historical revisionism actually extends to our collective memory of the book burning itself.
How so?
Well, today, we view the images of those 1933 bonfires as this terrifying, undeniable signal of the impending Holocaust. But at the time, the international community didn't see it that way at all.
Wait, really?
Yeah. In 1933, when news and photographs of the bonfires reached London and New York, it wasn't universally met with horror. The source reveals that many international observers, politicians, and journalists completely dismissed it as just an excessive college prank.
A college prank?
Yeah, they thought the students were just letting off steam. The concept of book burning simply didn't carry the immediate association with catastrophic political repression that it does in our minds today.
So how did book burning become the ultimate pop culture shorthand for evil?
That association had to be actively built. We can trace the modern perception of book burning directly to Allied propaganda during World War II.
Of course.
There was a conscious, concerted effort to cement the image of a barbaric, anti-intellectual enemy. Hollywood studios like MGM produced films featuring dramatic, sinister reenactments of the bonfires.
Right.
Disney even produced a 1943 propaganda cartoon titled Education for Death. It literally depicted Nazis throwing Shakespeare, the Bible, and the Talmud into the flames.
Even though none of those specific texts were actually burned during the Berlin bonfires.
Exactly. Pop culture essentially retroactively created the mythology to explain the evil they were fighting.
And then that mythology was further solidified during the Cold War through literature.
Oh, heavily.
Uh-huh.
Think of Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451 in 1953, or George Orwell's 1984.
Right.
These authors inextricably linked the burning of books to the absolute destruction of individual liberty and historical memory. They helped cement this modern concept of libercide.
Libercide. The idea that destroying a culture's books and committing genocide are basically part of the exact same continuous horrific action.
Precisely.
But this modern post-war view of libercide actually obscures a much longer, weirder history.
It does.
Because destroying books hasn't always been viewed as a fascist or bad act. Historically, there were long stretches of time where destroying books was seen as highly productive, even virtuous.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we can look back to the early modern period for a great example of this.
Like Ben Jonson's fire.
Yes.
So in 1623, the early modern playwright Ben Jonson, who was a contemporary of Shakespeare, his treasured personal library burned down in an accidental fire.
A massive loss.
Right, and he wrote a poem about the experience titled An Execration Upon Vulcan. But instead of condemning the destruction of books entirely, Jonson makes a really fascinating argument.
He basically yells at Vulcan, the Roman god of fire.
Yeah. He essentially argues, why did you burn my good scholarly books when you could have burned all the trashy romances?
Hilarious.
He goes on to list all these types of writing anagrams, palindromes, treasonous pamphlets that he genuinely believes deserve to be fed to the flames.
And Jonson's poem highlights a worldview that was very common at the time. The concept of justifiable book burning.
Justifiable destruction.
Exactly. There is a long, rich tradition of this. I mean, the biblical book of Acts describes sorcerers in Ephesus who voluntarily gather their magic books and burn them to demonstrate their new Christian faith.
Wow.
It was seen as a purifying, virtuous act. In medieval Oxford, burning Wycliffite religious texts was considered a defense of the true faith. For centuries, books were routinely worn out, scorched by reading candles, or deliberately cut up and recycled to stiffen the bindings of newer, supposedly more important books.
And we even see that impulse today with modern art.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, today, artists deliberately destroy books for creative purposes, like hacking up a standard authoritative textbook like H.W. Jansen's History of Art to make a critical statement about who is left out of the historical canon.
Right.
They physically alter, mutilate, and destroy the book to create something entirely new and challenging, proving that destruction and creation aren't always opposites. They can literally be linked.
So when you synthesize all of this, from the industrial shredders to the Berlin bonfires to Ben Jonson's library, it becomes clear that book destruction is not just a black and white issue of liberal humanists versus extremists.
You're right.
It is a deeply complex material history of accidents, art, bigotry, and chemistry.
So, what does this all mean for you, the listener, the reader, the owner of books?
Yeah.
We started in that loud, messy pulping plant in the Midlands where best-selling thrillers are casually turned into confetti. And we traveled through the terrifying ashes of 1933 Berlin. We obviously revere books as the ultimate symbols of human civilization, which makes their destruction horrifying.
That, as the survival of Magnus Hirschfeld's Institute and his legacy shows us, the ideas contained within those books, and sometimes the bronze statues representing them, are incredibly hard to melt away.
Yeah, the physical paper may burn at 1500 degrees, but the ideas require a much higher temperature to destroy.
Very true.
Which brings me to a final thought for you to mull over as we wrap up this deep dive. Throughout this entire conversation, we have focused intensely on the physical vulnerability of the printed word.
The paper, the bronze, the glue.
Exactly. But in our modern era, we have largely stopped printing physical books in favor of digital clouds.
Right, we read on screens now.
We do. We read on glass screens. Our most sensitive personal data and cultural histories live on distant, invisible servers. We've effectively eliminated the threat of the physical bonfire in the town square.
We have.
But in a world where a massive archive of human identity, history, and culture can be permanently deleted with a single keystroke, leaving absolutely no physical ashes behind, is our cultural memory actually more secure, or is it infinitely more fragile?